Hey everyone, Jason here from Off the Beaten Path, and this is the first day of a two-day trip through the high country. Through a series of events, I ended up with only one person with me on this trip. That was Bruce with his 200 series, and we came in from the north via Harriettville and Bright onto the Dargo High Plains Road, headed south down there. And our first track of the day was really the Blue Rag Range track. So this trip was after a solid week of rain. We really didn't know what condition the tracks were going to be in, and there was actually some rain around while we were driving. Blue Rag was fine though, and we made our way up the Blue Rag Range track and then came down off there via Basalt Knob. Ended up taking a side trip through Ritchie's Road, through this valley through here where you can see that was actually quite a scenic drive, what we could see of it. So I'll definitely include some of that footage before heading back out onto the Dargo High Plains Road, where we headed south down the High Plains Road, and that was sort of in mixed condition, and down to Grant Junction, where we headed into the Grant town site, the old historic township site there, where we stopped for lunch. From there we headed back out onto the High Plains Road ever so briefly, took the Hibernia track across to the Conway track that runs down to the Kingswell Bridge. Now if you've driven the Conway track, you know that it's quite a steep track with a bit of a clay sandy base, so it was fairly slippery, and Slow and Steady definitely won the race there. From there we headed around to the Billy Goats Bluff track and took that up to the Pinnacles. I've driven Billy Goats Bluff probably 4 times in the last few years. This was far and away the most difficult time that I've had driving that track. It hasn't been graded in a while. There was some big steps that hadn't been there even 12 months ago. So another good example of how conditions change. But let's get into the video. Should have some good footage to share with you guys from this iconic part of the high country. So thanks for watching, and hope you enjoy this video. So here we are just past Harriettville, making our way up Mount Hotham to the start of the Dargo High Plains Road. Looks like there's been a little bit more rainfall around here. The road's a bit wetter. Just checking the radar, there is some rainfall back behind us, so yeah, we're just going to have to see how this pans out. We might get where we're planning to go, or we might not. There's some cloud coming in, so it was nice and clear a couple of hours ago when we headed off, but there's some fog coming in now, so visibility might not be what we'd hoped either. So just one of those days, we're just going to have to see what we get and go from there. So here we are starting Blue Rag. We've just started to get a few spits of rain, but we'll see how we go. We've just lowered the tyre pressures, so today with the conditions I'm running 20 psi on the front and 22 on the back. And yeah, look, the Dargo High Plains Road on the way in was pretty nice and dry. So we'll just see how conditions on Blue Rag are. As I said, just starting to get a few little spits of rain, so should be a fun trip, and hopefully we'll get some views from the top of the trig point when we get there. As you can see, the start of Blue Rag is just a steady climb up this gravelly, rocky sort of track. I have seen it with ruts on it, but generally it's pretty good and not terribly difficult. Gets you up to the top of the first hill. Basically the Blue Rag Range track works its way along the ridgeline, up over each of the successive hills on the range until you get to the trig point or summit of the range, being the highest point. Not too far after you start going up, you head down and you can get a glimpse there of the track ahead, where it's basically up and down over the hills. And if I'd had the GoPro tilted up a little more, as I think I've said in other videos recently, I'm going to have to watch that, you get more of a sense of just how much of the valley you can see both sides of this track. Well worth getting out there to check it out for yourself. get the first glimpse just coming in there on the top of the frame of the trig point. Gives you some sense of just how far you've got to go. It's about 10 k's, I think, from memory, all the way in and out, so about 45 minutes to an hour. And centre right there, you can see one of the major climbs. So we've just reached the first steep descent on Blue Rag, with a steep climb afterwards, and there's definitely a vehicle up at Basalt Knob there, so we're not the only ones. So yeah, we'll start making our way down. Now, for those of you that have noticed on the in-car video there that I'm using a handheld radio, I do have a GME XRS built into the car. Unfortunately, something happened at a vehicle service just before Christmas. Radio was working when it went into the mechanics and was not working when I picked the car up from the mechanic. GME were really good about it. They honoured it under warranty. Apparently the motherboard had been fried somehow. So at this particular point in time when this was being filmed, the unit was actually on its way to the repairer based down in South Australia. He was great, fixed it over the Christmas break, and I got it back actually just after this trip. As you can see, this descent here is sort of rocky, gravelly. The track's nice and wide, but there is sort of a main established route where you can see it's pretty well travelled. I have seen this develop ruts, and I have seen sort of bypass tracks on the left hand side there. Certainly at this time none of that was happening. It was all in pretty good condition and pretty manageable. You don't need a particularly crazily set up vehicle to go and tackle Blue Rag. You know, any four-wheel drive with a low range transfer case, and probably ideally at least a 2-inch lift, but more importantly a good set of all-terrains, mud terrains if you want. Okay, this is the first big climb on Blue Rag. We've just come down the steep section behind us there, and we'll see how we go. Heading up here, track conditions look really good. Just saw a Navara come down here. We're just waiting for him, so he didn't seem to have any problems coming down. I think I don't know whether he was the one that came up this track earlier or whether he's come up Basalt Knob, but yeah, we'll see how we go. Blue Rag, the track's in really good condition. I guess it hasn't been reopened this year that long yet, so no big ruts or anything yet. Just enjoy the scenery, climbing up the ridgeline here. Second time driving Blue Rag, so good to be back. First time filming it. Had hoped to have a cameraman along to get some external footage, but unfortunately that didn't happen due to COVID. Messes with everything, that thing. But yeah, great to be out here in the padge with Bruce and his 200. This is quite a long, steady hill. It does have a couple of steep sections, but it's one of the longest hills on the whole Blue Rag track. And when you get to the top of this, that's where the Basalt Knob track actually meets the Blue Rag range track. Not a lot of room for overtaking on this particular section. The good thing is from the bottom you can get a good view of this whole section of track and see if someone's coming down, so it's generally a good idea to look out for that and wait at the bottom until they get down, allow them to pass on before you start climbing up. We are almost reaching the top. as I said earlier, the track's in really good condition, and look, generally speaking, it is. Despite being one of the most iconic and most talked about tracks, it's certainly not one of the most difficult. So as I was saying, standard four-wheel drive, decent tyres, even without a lift, but a 2-inch lift certainly makes it a little easier. You can certainly go and tackle this. This is where Basalt Knob turns off, and heading on from there you've got another steady climb, and this gives you one of your first really good looks at the balance of the track. At this point we still had pretty good visibility. Coming up here, this is one of the sort of only real obstacles. A pair of wombat holes here on the track that have developed. If you're an IFS vehicle like the Pajero, you're going to lift some wheels, but it's not overly difficult to drive. I think Bruce and his 200 just drove straight over that and barely noticed they were there. See the grey colour in the sky. It was blue skies when we started this track, and gradually the weather's sort of closed in. At this point we've still got some decent opportunities for views. The track here veers to the right. That section of track, or looks like track up to the left, actually just goes up to a parking area that provides a viewing opportunity. You can see there a little bit just how much you can see from along this track, with views right down into the valleys, and that's the trig point up the top there. So you can see how close we are and how good the views are still at this point. The weather does unfortunately close in on us before we get there. And even off to the left there, you can see at this point we can see down that valley quite well, even though the footage is flaring out a little bit from the bright light reflecting off the clouds. See the trig point there again on the right hand side of frame, so we're getting very, very close. So here we are, just shy of the trig point. We just passed another convoy on their way down, and yeah, this rain has come in from the north. Still blue skies out to the south, but yeah, it's changed dramatically and quickly. So we just have to monitor conditions. Yeah, at this stage we're still heading up to the trig point. Hopefully, you know, there's not too much in this and it passes without getting the track too wet and slippery. So yeah, as you saw, it's amazing how quickly this changed. This is one of the lumpier sections of the climb as you get close to the summit. I think it's the second last climb up to the top, but again, well established wheel paths through the rocks. Another set of wombat holes here that I was just looking at, figuring out where I was going to tackle, what line I was going to take, and work my way around the right hand side of those basically. See there, just a little bit of blue sky way off in the distance, and that hill in front of us is the last hill up to the trig point. So up over that little hill in between us, and then up to the trig point from there. And the rain's just getting heavier the closer we're getting to the summit. It's a real shame, but not much we could do about it. left there, it does fall off quite steeply, a little bit to the right as well. Not quite like the neck on Billy Goats, but definitely some camber, and again, not heaps of spots for overtaking. Something you do need to keep in mind, and always be looking ahead on the track to see anyone that might be coming. The last climb up's pretty straightforward, just a gravelly, rocky climb. Traction was fine for us. So, as you can see, not an overly difficult track, even in slightly wet conditions, as it was when we've tackled it today. And there's the trig point. Definitely one worth checking out if you're heading to the high country. So here we are on the Blue Rag trig point. It literally just started raining about 10 minutes before we got here. Weather closed in. You could actually, 10 minutes ago, you had a cracking view out here, and that fog's just closed in with the rain, so hopefully it clears again. Definitely clearer to the south there than it is to the north, but yeah, so far so good. So here we are leaving Blue Rag, heading on the Basalt North or Basalt Knob track. Haven't driven this before, so first time today. On the basis that Blue Rag was okay, even though it was a little bit wet, we're still tackling this, even though it's reputedly fairly steep. We'll just take it slow and steady and see how we go. So as you can see, the Basalt Knob track starts off very similar to Blue Rag. Yes, there's some ups and downs to it, but certainly these early sections are pretty easy and pretty drivable. I actually think the steep parts of Basalt Knob that people talk about are past Ritchie Road. We ended up taking Ritchie Road, which is a whole nother story. That's what happens when you're trying to drive, navigate, film all at the same time. Sometimes you take the wrong track, or what you think is the right track. Now I've cut this quite a lot because there was a lot of water on the camera, making it hard to see. Really just wanted to show you, give you some idea of what it was like through there. You work your way through a series of valleys, a lot of zigzagging back up and down the hill, and a couple of little water crossings. Quite a scenic drive, even in the weather conditions that we had. It was really nice drive. We did see, I think, one other person on this section of track, so we weren't the only crazy ones out there. But definitely I'd go back, and there was, next to one of the little river crossings, there was quite a nice little campsite there. This is just one of the hairpins. This particular one's probably one of the sharpest. Generally in the Pajero, I'll get around these in one lock. This particular one, I didn't. But Bruce in his 200 actually got around here on a single wheel lock. Apparently the 200s, at least his model, have a steering assist button that'll actually let the wheels turn further than the steering wheel can turn them for sharp hairpins like that, which is a pretty nifty sort of feature. As you can see, it does vary a bit. One minute you're sort of working your way down the side of the hill, the next minute you're sort of driving up over the next one. And as I said, there's certainly some long steady gravel hills here, but nothing terribly difficult at all. And yeah, definitely a trip I'd like to do again in better weather conditions, so we can see a little bit more of what's going on in this area. So So we just passed the intersection with Basalt Knob and Ritchie Road, and we turn left onto the Ritchie Rd Track, which will follow through down to Talbotville. Yeah, this is not that long after the last recording. Still steady but light rain, but yeah, still no traction issues. Like, the track's wet now, obviously, but yeah, haven't had any issues. It's just a shame this fog's closing in, but the way the weather's changing up here, I'm hopeful that in the next couple of hours, by the time we're across and trying to go up Billy Goats, that we've got a bit of a different situation with the weather, and it's cleared up a little bit. So we'll just have to wait and see how that pans out. First of the little river crossings here. Fast flowing but not particularly deep. And this is where we actually ran into the only other person we saw on this track. Fortunately, he was able to reverse up, and there was a nice easy area there for overtaking. From that first river crossing, we're working our way up here and over the next hill. So still got about 6 or 8 k's to go to get out to the High Plains Road. It has been raining consistently. It's just after midday now, so there's going to be a fair bit of water on the tracks. It's not really heavy rain, it's just steady, so yeah, everything's getting wet. Just remains to be seen. Still hoping that it's going to clear in the afternoon. So yeah, once we get onto the High Plains Road, the plan for us is to head through to the Grant historic area, have some lunch there. There's a picnic and barbecue area there, and then head over to Billy Goats hopefully from there. Just probably weather and track condition dependent. So far, you know, we haven't had any traction issues. This hasn't been overly steep, and there's not much clay here either, so that certainly helps things in that regard. It's been a really nice little drive through here on Ritchie Road. Definitely worth checking out. And you can see there the river running along the bottom of this valley, so we're just making our way to the next river crossing on this section of track here. This area is marked on the HEMA maps as white timber. So yeah, here we are just at this next little river crossing. Again, I don't think this is particularly deep. It's moving pretty well though. You can probably see out the window there. So yeah, we'll just see how things pan out. Still working our way along the High Plains Road to Grant, and I was just chatting to Bruce on the radio, and it is called the Dargo High Plains Road, which presumably everybody knows it's because it's elevated, but I think often because it is such a wide road and long sections like this are fairly well enclosed, it gets lost the fact that you're at 1,345 metres. That's what we're sitting at right now. So yeah, it is literally one of the higher roads, not probably the highest, but one of the higher roads, certainly in Victoria, that you can drive on. Very scenic, and the main road itself is in conditions like this quite easily drivable. So well worth checking out if you're in the area. So there is this section of bitumen near the Grant Historic Area turnoff. That sign there is one of your first indications it's coming up, so if you're heading southbound like we are, you keep an eye out for that. And then up here on the left you'll see some of the large brown tourist signs pointing to the Grant Historic Area. Where you turn right and head into Grant. Now just as you pull in through here, there's a large sign that tells you a little bit about the history of the Grant Historic Area. It used to be a mining township here with a population of I think up to 3,000 or 4,000 people. There's literally nothing left apart from the open space where the township used to be. Quite amazing and well worth checking out. There are still a lot of mine shafts in the area as well. If you're into mining history, you can certainly check them out. So we're just coming into the actual Grant Historic Township area just now. It's about 5-6 k's off the High Plains Road. It's very well signposted, easy to find. The cemetery is just a couple of k's back. Both areas well worth a look. There's a lot of side tracks here that aren't even on maps that you could go and explore, that have mine shafts and such things at the end of them. It looks busy in here today. We'll see how we go. So that cleared area to the left there is where the township actually was, and there's a sign there that shows you some of the layout of the town as well as some other information. One of the rare times I've actually had the awning set up. We've had a fair bit of rain today, just finished cooking lunch. As you can see, the super peg or drifter awning 270-degree wing gives you good coverage over the back of the car. I've just got some double-sided Velcro up there to anchor that flat back on, so keep the rain out of the cooking area. And then you've got this whole area around this side as well for use. Yeah, really happy with it. Had it a couple of years now. Don't use it as much as I should, but it's very quick and easy to set up. Thanks everybody for watching, and keep an eye out for the next instalment coming along, where we head over to Kingswell Bridge via the Conway track and then up to Billy Goat's Bluff, Mount Wellington and beyond. Really well worth watching and tuning in. Please like this video if you like it, and as always subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching. See you in the next